The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents Science and Intellect Are Your Gods? In the course of discussions with theists, sometimes they'll present arguments for the existence of God. In other cases, they'll present arguments for belief in the existence of God, whether or not one exists. And in some cases, they'll present kind of arguments against atheism. And sometimes they'll just come up with something that's a flat-out ridiculous assertion meant to portray the character of atheist or the quality of life as an atheist. One version of this, or one category of versions of this that I've heard many times, is that, well, science is your God, or knowledge is your God, or science is your religion, or you've made a God out of your intellect. You are arrogant and proud. You are so thrilled with the fact that you're intelligent that you have put this on a pedestal above God, and that is a sin. So first of all, these accusations seem to be rooted in some sort of quoque fallacy, the you do it too fallacy. You see, they've been in a position where they have been made to feel ridiculous for their beliefs. You know, they live in a world where on occasion someone will say, wow, you believe in a God, or you believe in the supernatural, or you believe in, a religion, these sorts of things, portraying this as a negative. And I think there's a good case for that. But they're in that position, so one of the easiest things to do is to reach out and say, oh yeah, well, you believe in a God too. You just believe in a different category of God, a different quality of God. But in doing so, they kind of have to twist and butcher the definitions of God and religion. Is it fair to say that a God is simply something you revere or worship, something you respect, something you love or admire? Because this puts them in a position where they'd like to accuse you of idolatry or worshiping a false God, but I think it's more of a deflection away from the criticisms that they are in fact engaged in worshiping a God without good reason. Now, the traditional concept of idolatry, still there was some sort of being involved. To remove the concept of being or agency from a God entirely, to where it can just be anything, I think is a bit of an unjustified move. When we look at traditional idolatry, yes, there may have been a statue, and so that was the thing, but the statue represented a spirit or a being of some sort. Even in the cases where people worshipped volcanoes or the sun, these were either pointers to some sort of spirit, or they believed that these things possessed a spirit, or where a spirit or godlike being dwelled, or they were some sort of anthropomorphic representation, that there was a concept there that included God as a being. Now, you can have a religion centered around the worship of this concept. So it's possible that a non-being concept could result in a religion, that the worship of intelligence or knowledge or science would then qualify as a religion. But when it comes to this is your God, now we've opened up the definition of God so widely that almost anything could fit. Are we doing the same thing with the definition of religion in this case? Is it really fair to say that religion is just whatever you do on the weekend, or whatever you do as a group, or whatever gives you meaning and purpose, whatever you point to as the absolute supplier of answers, whatever is of most importance to you, that is your religion? I don't think so. It's been said that football in the United States is the most popular religion come every Sunday. The fans often fervently defend their teams. They'll paint their bodies. They engage in superstitious rituals and traditions and songs. And if someone should criticize their preferred team religion, they may even resort to violence in opposition to these competing team religions. But that doesn't make football a religion in any useful sense. I'd never consider football to be a reasonable entry to what is your religion on a form that you filled out, and I don't think most people would either. And so it seems disingenuous to, when your actual religion, your Baptist, Catholic, Lutheran, Scientology, Episcopalian, Hinduism, Islam, when these practices that you engage in that form your identity, that form the foundation of what you're going to believe, which are in fact based on some sort of God, or well, maybe not so much in the case of Scientology, but some sort of belief along those lines. When you're criticized for that, the criticisms aren't, oh, you believe this. It's more about, you believe this without good reason. I want to understand why you believe this because it doesn't make any sense to me. And to reply with, well, you have a religion too, your religion is football, or your religion is science, or your religion is intellect. Not only is this the two quoque fallacy, but it's disingenuous as well. And I think it's demeaning to both the terms God and religion, but it also kind of diminishes what they believe. It's almost like they're acknowledging, yes, what I believe is absolutely ridiculous, but so is yours, so is what you believe. It's like somewhere deep down there's a wound that you've picked at, and so the projection of some of the difficulties they have onto others seems to be a reasonable response for them. And so it seems kind of strange to me that they want to project this idea that science or reason or intellect or knowledge is a negative thing. You know, this idea of, oh yes, well, what I believe you may view as negative, but here's what you believe and I also view it as negative. These things are, generally speaking, things that the Christian or the theist also respects. They do have a respect and a reliance on science and intellect and knowledge and understanding and reason and evidence. They just put them at a lower tier than God. And that gets to the core of one of the real problems, that we have elevated these things above their God. This objection seems to be almost entirely Christian, by the way. It's very rare. I don't know if I've ever had a Muslim or a Hindu talk about how, oh, well, you have just put your intellect and put science and reason and evidence above God. In many cases, they seem to value these like on a par with God, and that's why they would try to come up with arguments, reasonable arguments and evidence to support the idea that a God exists. So it seems to begin in part with another idea that steps outside of Christianity, which is that, well, everyone must have some God, some deity. There must be something that you worship. Because from their point of view, this God, this entity that they're worshiping, is the source of all knowledge and power and value. And so if someone else is claiming to have knowledge and power and value, then they must be pointing to something else that represents this. And this sets up an equivocation fallacy. The absolute source of knowledge and information is God. And you think you have knowledge and information, so your absolute source must also be some type of a God, even if it's not my God. And then that sets me up to say, well, you can't demonstrate that your God exists, and it's a mess after that. And because they worship and revere their proposed source for knowledge and truth, they project this onto others and assume that we also must worship and revere this source of knowledge and truth. In putting things above God is heresy within Christendom. And I do that, as do pretty much all of my atheist friends. We easily value science, reason, evidence above a God. But in Christianity, there are a number of verses in the Bible, for example, that address and foster this idea that nothing is above God, and that specifically reason and information and knowledge from the world is inferior. For example, Proverbs 3:5 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." Whether or not this applies to don't trust science, I don't think there's very many apologists that would say that this is a don't trust science, that this is talking about when you're trying to understand the difficult questions in the world, not, why is the sky blue, but why am I here? Don't lean on your own understanding. Trust the Bible, trust God, trust this source, reach out to God and he'll give you the information. But it begins this kind of trend of disparaging the value of earthly knowledge. 1 Corinthians 2, verses 6 and 7, "However, we speak wisdom among those who are mature, yet not the wisdom of this age, nor of the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. But we speak the wisdom of God in mystery, the hidden wisdom which God ordained before the ages of our glory, or for our glory. This is the idea that God has some knowledge and information that goes far beyond anything we'll understand from this world. And it's expounded upon in the very next chapter, 1 Corinthians 3:18 through 20. Let no one deceive himself. If anyone among you seems to be wise in the age, let him become a fool, that he may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. For it is written, He catches the wise in their own craftiness. And again, the Lord knows the thoughts of the wise, they are futile. This is an interesting conflict because the thoughts of the wise are futile. Now, I would say that this might qualify as one of the most popular deepities that anyone's ever uttered, because it seems to us, hey, this person is wise. Ah, yes. But from God's perspective, that wisdom is foolishness. Those who think they are wise are in fact fools, which props up this idea that there's some immensely deeper level of understanding that they will have access to with God. And if these two things seem to be in conflict, then the worldly knowledge must in fact be the thing that's wrong, because God cannot be. Continuing on in Romans 1:22, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. So because of these verses and because of other verses, they've been convinced that they've tuned into a higher truth, a higher understanding. And therefore, for us to put a lower truth or a lower understanding above it seems anathema to them. And intellect and knowledge, the very idea that these things that we've attained through reasoned investigation could be on a higher tier or more valuable than a God, is an abomination. It's something that they have to reject. And so when you talk to them and launch objections to their God, and we are approaching this from the standpoint of reason, from the standpoint of evidence. I don't believe in a God because I haven't seen enough evidence to convince me that a God exists. I don't have a religion because I don't see the value of applying the label of religion to football or generalized things, and for organized religions and for even unorganized versions, of Christianity. I don't find enough compelling, good information in Christianity to adopt it as a label. That's not to say there's nothing good in there. I'm more of a fan of finding the good and keeping it from wherever you find it, whether you find it in the Bible or the Quran, whether you find it written on a bathroom wall. There's plenty of wisdom written on the bathroom wall. That doesn't mean I need to adopt the bathroom wall religion and take into my heart all of the things that are written on the bathroom wall in an all or nothing proposition. So there's actually a lot going on here in this you've made science your God, or you've made knowledge and information and intellect your God. And a lot of it has to do with disparaging the reliance on the most consistently reliable pathway to knowledge that humanity has ever discovered. No religion has demonstrated a veracity even remotely comparable to science, let alone just barely above chance if they get lucky. The same reliable pathways that we use to understand the world, theists use every single day. They rely on reason, knowledge, intellect. They rely on the findings of science to live their daily lives. And the only time that these things get rejected and dismissed as inferior is when the truths that we discover about the world through our own investigation, through reason and intellect, conflict with the pronouncements made by their religion. This is one of the many protective mechanisms of religion that allows them to twist good or indifferent things into being bad things, whether it's some version of love that their religion doesn't like, whether it's reason, or evaluation of evidence, rationality, compassion, an understanding of the world. Any of these things can be portrayed as bad if it's required to protect the foundations of their religion. In their view, reality is just a place to wipe your feet before you get to move on to the real life. Whereas in my view, reality is all we've got until somebody demonstrates something else. And even then, reality is still important. The sum total of everything we've ever experienced, that anybody we've ever known has ever experienced, has happened right here in this reality that we're experiencing. But these things don't matter as much or at all if you are focused on an afterlife and a God. This is a place to wipe your feet. And they can safely ignore all the elements of this life in deference to the next life. Now, I'm a humanist. I do rely on and respect the process of reasoned critical examination of evidence in order to better understand the world that I live in. Does it mean humanism is my religion? I mean, after all, the Supreme Court has ruled that for all practical purposes, humanism counts as a religion. Well, I don't tend to view it as my religion. If somebody wanted to say, your religion is humanism, I'd say, well, you could probably label it that way, but it's not like, I get together with humanists and I read the Humanist Manifesto and I take it as dogmatically, true. This is just more of I value the same things that are valued within secular humanism. I don't consider science or humanism or intellect or knowledge to be my gods or my religions. I don't think these things meet the normative useful definitions of gods and religion to the extent that we have a useful definition of gods. But if you simply mean, when you accuse me of making a god or a religion out of science and intellect, etc., if you mean that I value reason, evidence, skepticism, critical thinking, science, humanism, intellect, knowledge, compassion, empathy, and countless other things at a vastly higher level than your God, then you're correct. And why don't you?
This video is made possible by supporters of the Atheist Debates Patreon project. You can find more information and add your support at patreon.com/atheistdebates.